So, welcome to session 1, Introduction to Mindfulness with Living in the Pink. If you've watched the introduction clip, then you'll kind of have a bit of a background into who we are and why we're doing this. If you haven't listened to it already and you want to just plunge straight in, then that's fine. We're just going to be looking at our mindfulness course, and we did sessions 1 to 10 in the course that we ran as part of a project. And I've got two lovely ladies with me who are going to chat about what we did in the course, so that if you fancy doing a bit more, then it should give you an idea of the sort of things that we talked about in the course. So this is session 1, Introduction to Mindfulness. So we started the session by listening to a recording from Finding Peace in a Frantic World by Breathworks. They've got lots of lovely resources on their website, and they've also put things on SoundCloud, including all of the meditations. Oops, let's just mute poor old Barbara, who's got a bit of a cough, so she's staying off camera and off the microphone as well for this morning, but is sitting there joining with us in spirit, which is lovely. So yes, the meditation we've been listening to is called Meditation of Breath and Body. It's about 8 minutes long, and it's quite a good introduction to mindfulness if you haven't done mindfulness before, or it's quite a good recap really if you have. It deals with some of the underlying concepts of what is mindfulness and kind of where are we headed with that. So if you haven't listened to it already, you fancy stopping now and going off and finding it so that you know what we're referring to, or if you just wanted to listen to it at a different point, that's fine as well. So for Anne and for Leslie, who have just joined us with the meditation then. So in the meditation, it talked about a few different concepts, mindfulness, what it is, what are the kind of things that it aims to do, and so on. So I've just made a little note of a few of the concepts from there. So what is mindfulness, and what's it got to do with the body and breath? Maybe we just have a little chat about that in the meditation. It talks about focusing in on the breath, and if you've never done mindfulness meditation before, you might wonder, well, what's the breath got to do with mindfulness? So perhaps we'll just have a little chat about that to kick us off.
Well, well, if I can interject at that point, yes. I must admit, my early thoughts on mindfulness were just based on things that you saw, shop books, colouring this, reading that, lighting a candle, and actually that was more relaxing than actually being mindful. And I didn't realise that. I just thought that, oh well, we'll do this mindful colouring book, and while you're colouring, your mind's off and you're thinking about this and you're thinking about that. And actually, that isn't what it's about at all. And the breath, to me, is the part of our body. It's the action that keeps us alive and keeps us here. It's the most important action, and it keeps the heart beating. And if we can be focused on that element of it, suddenly we are actually being mindful. We are thinking about what's happening now this very minute. The idea of your mind going off and chattering away, that I don't think anyone can avoid that. But that was the thing that amused me when we first started doing our mindful sessions, about the instruction to escort our mind back to what we're focusing on, which was the breathing. And I thought that was a really lovely image, you know, oh, it's okay. You've gone off and you've started thinking about the digger that's outside in the street, and you've started thinking about what you've got to do after we finish this. Now you've got to come back and concentrate on the breathing. I think that it really is a very good discipline, because it's telling you that's what the moment's about. It's the breathing, it's the being alive, and it's now. And that is something that is very powerful. Well, I certainly think it's very powerful.
Yes, yes, I like it. Yes, I like your interjection. Thank you. Leslie, have you got anything to add?
Well, I think Anne said a lot about it there. It was really valid. And I think for me, sort of the breath is sort of my home base. And you keep back to that. And you can sort of put the brakes on your mind going off and not coming back. Because it's natural for the mind to wander. That's how we're made, that's how we're wired. But if you can concentrate on your breath and come back, you do get that sense of stillness.
Right.
You don't exaggerate what you're feeling. You just, this is what I'm feeling. It's no worse, it's no better. This is how it is. And sometimes then you can think, I can cope with this. It may be a pain, but it's here and I can cope with it. And
Right.
I think really powerful, really helpful.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just sort of reminding myself of the variety of themes that were covered in that meditation. So, you know, being in the now, and being with the sensations that are here with us right now can have that sort of calming and grounding effect. So that's quite a big thing in mindfulness, isn't it? It's to be able to just take a little pause. We tend to live a lot in the mind, with the mind's chatter, the to-do list, the plotting, the planning, the worrying, the what happened yesterday, what's going to happen in the future. And all of that can be very, very stressful. And it can provoke the stress response in the body. So it encourages our body then to give out adrenaline and cortisol and all the things that make us feel wound up and tight. And being in the now can just be a way of stepping out of that, even if it's just for a few moments at a time, and just being in the now, being with the breath. And then the brilliant thing about that is that when you step out and you're with the breath and you're focusing on the breath, your body can then switch over into relaxation mode as well. So it gives you a chance to calm down from the mind, to step out of your thoughts and your processes and think, I can cope with that better. It has that. And it also produces our relaxation hormones to counteract the stress ones, which is brilliant, again, for our mental well-being, but also for our physical well-being as well, which is fabulous, isn't it?
Yeah.
A few more of the things they said in there. So you talked, Anne, about escorting the mind back to the breath, which is great. I mean, it's a technique in mindfulness. It can be a little bit tricky when you're new to it, because our mind just wanders where it wants to most of the time, doesn't it? So that kind of new skill or concept of bringing the mind back to the breath, that's quite a powerful. That's a sort of a major thing to start with in mindfulness.
Sometimes you're not even aware of the fact that you've started thinking about something else. That's probably why I hung on to that, just escort it back. I thought, well, guess I'm suddenly thinking about this, and I've suddenly started getting concerned. And no, I've got to stop. Back you come. That's what you've got to do. You can't, and you don't actually realise, even if you're not doing your mindfulness and you're sitting down, you're having a little bit of a rest. And it's only a rest in inverted commas, because the thing that's still going hammer and tongs is your mind and what you're thinking about and your thoughts. And it's really, that is really, as I've said before, powerful. It's impressive that you can suddenly take control of that. It usually controls you, but this is how you control it, by going back to breathing in, breathing out.
Yeah.
Breathing in. And that's very
very empowering.
Yeah.
Yes, because it suggests to us that we have a choice.
Yes.
Because that feeling of having no choice, that our mind will just drag us wherever it wants to go, with all of the stress that probably comes with that. That can be quite anxiety provoking. And to be able to step out of that, to think, actually, I've got a choice. I can take a little break. I mean, my mind will wander back there, it will, but I can escort it.
Just for the moment, yes.
Which is lovely, isn't it? I mean, there are a lot of analogies that we talked about in the sessions, aren't there, about the thoughts. They can be described as a puppy. If you're familiar with puppies, then puppies are here, there and everywhere, wandering off. Or a toddler, rampaging about and fiddling with this and that and the other. Or it can be like storm clouds. Or it can be like an out of control train that you feel that you're riding on. And in the course of the sessions, we talk about, just building up little techniques like this, just to be able to decide, do we want to get on that train? Or do we want to encourage our puppy? Do we want to escort our puppy back to the basket and, into calmness and so on and so forth? So that's lovely. They touched on letting things go, letting things be. So that's another major one in mindfulness, isn't it? I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that, but the whole process of, we can see it and then we can decide to let it go.
Well, I did quite a bit of that this morning because although I was due to get up fairly early, I was woken even earlier because, as I've said, we have diggers over the road. Someone's having a new drive, and accompanying the very noisy diggers are the workmen's radios, because obviously you have to have those on, and I can't decide what sound they actually wanted to hear. And then my new neighbour, who hasn't moved in yet, but I had been warned, was going to have a water meter fitted. So they came this morning to fit the water meter. Well, they have to dig quite a sizable hole in the road. So this morning, I was woken to all this, and I thought, no, I'm going to listen to this. And yes, I could have a humph about it, but I decided to sit on the bed in the bedroom and listen to the individual noises. And I can remember doing the session where we listened to the noise around us. And when we did that session, I hadn't got any noises to listen to. It was blissfully quiet. But this morning, I thought, this is just what this is all about. So I started listening to the individual noises and focusing on those, and then listening back to the men who were digging the hole, and I could identify what they were doing and how they were doing it, and then I could hear some conversation. And I wasn't watching any of this, I was just listening. And then I heard the man who lives next door to the house that's having the drive trying to carry on a telephone conversation, and he'd come out of the house in order to do that. So there were all these things going on, and I sat there and I just listened to them and I let them go. They were still there, they were still making a noise, and I let them go.
Yeah.
And then I was ready to come down, make my cup of tea, make my breakfast. But just for that, it was unbelievable for a start of the morning. And I thought, right, this is what you've got to do. And it was amazing. It was so interesting to do that. Very
really, topical, very topical.
Yes, and it was so interesting and so focused. It made me be calm about all those things. Whereas when it started, not this as well. Goodness me.
Yeah.
Well, then you sit down and it's amazing what it can actually do. It can resolve all that concern and really bring a lot of calm.
Yes. Yeah. Did you want to add to that, Leslie? You just
when things like that happen, and you can quickly sort of get very cross and angry.
Yeah.
If you can then come back and accept what's happening and be with it, then you won't suffer after. Because if you get angry and you get all uptight, you're the one who physically as well as emotionally suffer afterwards. If you come back and diffuse that, it's just so, you can be calm, and it's so helpful.
Yes.
Because things are going to be thrown at you always, you know, how you react to them.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So that's another major thing, isn't it? Reacting or responding is another thing that crops up in the course, in mindfulness. Things happen to us, whether we like it or whether we don't. You know, we live amongst other people, other goings on. There's all sorts of stuff that can really wind us up in life that sometimes we have no choice over. If we're at home and something's been dug up outside, you know, maybe we can't go out for the day. Maybe we've got COVID and we have to isolate, we have to sit in. So, and the natural reaction to that could just be to rant and rave and get really uptight, and for the adrenaline to go, the cortisol, and to just end up feeling really tense, really stressed. And then that's having all the, you know, really adverse effects on the body as well as on the mind. So that behaviour of just learning to accept, to be with it, to explore it with curiosity, and to let it go. That's another really powerful thing about mindfulness. Yeah, that's lovely. So let's just have a little bit of a look at the handout that we talked about for session 1. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen and just check that you can see that. Can you see that okay? Is that a good size?
Yeah, that's fine for me, thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. So the handouts were used as a kind of a thing to talk about, really, just to, you know, make a few notes on a few things that we wanted to cover in the session, and they got sent out before the session so people could have a little look at those and read if they wanted to. So with the course, it's a case of taking it in your own way. You know, some people like handouts, some people like reading round subjects, some people don't. Some people just want to come to the sessions and just have a listen. And so all of that's absolutely fine, isn't it? It's, you know, it's doing things in your own way. But just have a quick sort of glance at you know, how the sessions were structured. So this was the very first handout for session 1, mindfulness introduction. So we talked about what we wanted out of the sessions and, you know, all the practical kind of stuff, and then went on to talk about mindfulness, just like we've been doing around the meditation. So in each session we had a focus meditation, and we talked a little bit about that, and like we've done now. And then we talked about some of the underlying concepts in this kind of way that we've just been doing. So in mindfulness introduction, we listened to that meditation, had a bit of a chat about what it meant, you know, what sort of things cropped up at the time. And then we had a look at what the rest of the sessions would involve. So we've touched on a few of the sessions already. So things that we cover, we talk about autopilot, which is a concept that's familiar to most people, I think, really. Autopilot, doing something without being in the present moment. It's somewhere the brain's just off doing things on autopilot, as opposed to, actually concentrating and focusing on things and kind of, well, what does autopilot have to give to us, and what does it take away, and how can we step out of it sometimes, and why would we want to do that? Don't know if anything springs to mind about autopilot as you just...
Yeah, I remember when we were talking about that, we will often perhaps eat a meal and be listening to the radio. We've got things done, we've got the radio and we're not concentrating on what we do. Well, I'm talking personally here. Radio's on and you're getting things sorted, and then you sit down and eat whatever you've prepared. And that was very nice. But what a waste of the experiences you've just had to have spent them listening to the radio. And sometimes it's nice to take that off and concentrate on exactly what you're doing, on the smells and the sensations, and even when you've prepared your food and you're eating it, to slow down, taste it. What's it? How has that changed because you happen to have stir-fried it? What was it like when it was raw? We don't think about these things for most of the time. And that's the now bit, being there when you're eating it, switching off the whatever is distracting you and thinking about what you're doing. I mean, I come down in the morning and I do exactly the same thing over and over again. And it's if you go out of that pattern that you miss something out or you forget something. And that's when, well, it's when you can get yourself into trouble. You leave the keys in the house or you do something. You've really got to be there. And you've got to be thinking about what you're doing rather than just doing it. The habits can cause no end of problems to you. You really need time to sort of step out of that and think, well, this morning I am actually going to think about what I'm doing. I remember that particularly, and I have changed the way, not changed the way I do things because that's really hard, but think about the way I do things rather than just do them.
And do some things off autopilot just to have a little break from doing that autopilot kind of. Yeah. Leslie, did you want to add anything?
I think autopilot does have a part to play in everyday things we've learned how to do over the years. So we don't have to concentrate so much on doing everyday things, mundane tasks. But I think that Anne's right. When you sit down to a meal or when you're driving, then you do have to come off autopilot and really focus on what you're doing, to be happier and to be safer.
True. Yes, true. And yes, and so you're touching on being happier as well. So autopilot, tends to be around for everything that we do. So you're out walking the dog, and a lot of people are on autopilot on their phone. Or if they're not actually on their phone, they're on autopilot thinking about all the to-do list. And actually, it's a beautiful morning, and there are flowers developing, and there's a bit of mist, and there's a bit of raindrop, lots and lots of stuff that we can actually get quite a lot of pleasure out.
Yes, it's true, that is. I mean, I'm listening, well, here I'm telling you I'm listening to the radio. Well, I do enjoy listening to the radio, but there are programs that I've listened to where people have said, I go out for a walk and I'll go to the park, or I'll go over such a body meadow or such a body heath, and it gives me time to think, and I think about this and I think about that, and I think, that's really good, but where are you walking? What are you looking at? And I think that actually noticing that, oh, that conifer hedge there is full of sparrows and they're all arguing. Let's go and have a listen. Yes. Or let's have a little, oh, and look at all the leaves that have shed off this plant. They're all there all over the floor. Look at the colours and the patterns. And I think those are the things that we tend not to do. Yes, you can go out and think, you know, and I can understand why people say that, but what a waste of the natural wonders not to notice those as well.
Yes. So again, you know, with mindfulness, it can sound as though it's a bit preachy almost, but it's there for when you want to take it. So as you're saying, you know, you can understand why people take time out and they're thinking about other things. Sometimes that's necessary, but as you say, also if you can just take a little bit of time away from whatever the mind is chewing over at the time, and you can have a look around you and make the most, then that can add to your happiness and contentment in life. So that's, you know, and it's something we can dip into once we kind of realise that.
And I think mindfulness can give you that choice of what you're going to focus on.
Yeah.
You can say that, right, I'm going to do this now, and I choose to do it.
Yes. Yes.
With my whole attention.
Yeah.
You stand more of a chance then of doing it.
Yes. Absolutely. Giving you choice, and isn't that liberating? Yeah. So just looking down the list as well then at things we're sort of approaching by talking about other things. So coming to your senses, being more than doing. So we've been talking about, you know, being. I'm walking and I'm in the moment. I am being, and I'm smelling things and I'm hearing things, and I'm actually being aware of that in being mode rather than in doing mode. So that's another of the concepts that gets introduced in the session. Doing mode. That's what us human beings do, especially in the society that we live in, where we're encouraged to be on the go all the time, not necessarily even physically, although it can be, but, you know, racing from one place to the other and schedules and times and But even when we're sitting or when we're taking a little walk or when we're eating, you know, we tend to be doing, which can just be sitting, thinking about our to-do list. That's kind of doing mode as well. And so all of that can have a very detrimental effect on our well-being when we're always on the go. You know, it's not actually very good for us. So taking time out into being mode can also be very healing and replenishing, just spending time being, which is, you know, great. Another powerful thing. Just looking at other things that we've sort of we've talked about a little bit. So working with thoughts and whether to get on board or not. So there, you know, there was the train analogy. You know, thoughts come. Sometimes our thoughts just drag us along, but in mindfulness we can actually think, that's a thought. I don't necessarily need to react to it, and I don't necessarily need to do something about it. Our thought can be like that, you know, train, and we can, if we can learn to take a step back, then we can learn to decide, do we want to go where that train's going today? Sometimes you might have to, you know, you've got to go, but sometimes you might think, no, actually, no, that can go to wherever it's going to go, but I don't need to get on that train today. I can do something else instead. Anything else that occurs? So just having a look at working with difficult experiences as well. So in the meditation that we've just done, they talked about, while we're looking around the body, is you're sitting still or lying still, and often you might be in a bit of discomfort somewhere. I mean, I think, you know, particularly as you get a bit older in life, you know, the body does kind of have aches and pains. And when we sit still, we can sort of tend to, you know, our attention's drawn to that. Often we just ignore that and we carry on anyway, but sometimes our attention's drawn to that. And in the meditation, it says you've got choices over, well, how do I deal with that? If it's something you can't do an awful lot about, you do what you can. You know, you might shift position or whatever, which is what it was talking about in the meditation. But maybe you've got a long-term ache and a pain that shifting position, and you still, you know, it's still there. It's something that you do have to kind of live with. You do what you can, but you're still living with it. And choosing, you know, to explore that and to be open and receptive to that in mindfulness is also said to be quite a liberating thing, because there's a concept of primary and secondary suffering. So primary suffering, things that happen to us whether we like it or whether we don't, aches and pains. Secondary suffering can then be the way that we respond to it. So like with aches and pains, you know, what's your relationship with pain? Do you fight it? Do you tense up? Do you try to ignore it? Do you try to push through it? And mindfulness can help us with those kind of things to explore how do we deal with pain or adversity or unpleasant situations or so on and so forth. Noticing the good things, balancing the negativity bias. Don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that.
It's it's easy to find the negative things in life, isn't it? And sometimes you feel overwhelmed by it, and you do have to make, well, once again, as we've said before, choices. You have to make a choice to be positive, to be to see the way forward that's the least stressful, because negative responses can develop and you end up getting very worked up. You look for the right things. I mean, the noise this morning could have been very negative, but I found the positive in it, which in its own little way was entertaining. But yeah, it's and you can get negative responses from other people that can be disheartening, but you've got to accept them and work with them. That's quite hard, really. That's a hard bit.
Yeah, because that does sound really, you know, as you're saying that, it does sound like really hard to do. And again, you know, we've built up lots of behaviours in our life, and when people are, you know, a bit sharp with us, it can be tempting to be a bit sharp back, and you know, to continue a bit of a vicious cycle and stuff. But again, all about choices with mindfulness. So knowing that we've got a negativity bias, human beings are programmed to notice negative things and to remember negative things, and to remember negative things and to, you know, to expect them to happen. That is the way we've been kind of genetically wired. Knowing that and then trying to actually make a point of, yeah, okay, negative things happen, but we can try to counterbalance that a little bit by actively looking for good things in life and focusing a bit more on those. That can be really liberating as well, I think. And it can make the world seem, you know, a less kind of negative place if you're purposely looking out for positive things in people, or, you know, the flowers, the sparrows in the hedge, the sensation of having a shower, you know, the smell of your favourite shower, those kind of things. They sound very simple, but getting into that kind of those habits can liberate us a little bit from all of that negativity.
And we don't have to believe all the negative stuff that comes our way either.
Yes.
We can choose where we believe some of it, you know, because the media and everything, most of it is a negative bias, as you say. I think sometimes you can think, you know what, do I really believe that? And just sort of choose that. No, I'm not going to go down that road. I'll do something you say to counterbalance that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. And do we even want to listen to the news? You know, that crops up, doesn't it, in the conversations about negativity? Because obviously news, you know, tends to report bad things. It kind of plays into our negativity bias. And yes, there are bad things in the world, and we can't just, you know, pretend they don't exist. But we can try to escort our attention to some positive things as well, just to keep it counterbalanced, so that we still feel like life, it can be, you know, a good place to be, and society and people and so on. So I'm just, you know, carrying on down the list. I'm aware that time's ticking, so I'm just looking at other things on the list then that we'll cover in the course. So kindfulness to yourself, looking at being kind to yourself and to other people. Again, we can tend to be really hard on ourselves, to judge ourselves harshly. That can then interfere with the way we deal with other people. We can, you know, be judgmental or have unrealistic expectations about people. But again, in mindfulness, it's about taking a step back really and realizing what's going on there and choosing your response instead of just going
I
with.
think it's quite difficult to be kind to yourself. I think that you but then I'm probably speaking personally. I tend to think that I should be able to deal with everything that comes along, and when you can't, or when you find something overwhelming, that's when occasionally you need to be able to step back and think about how you would behave to someone else to support them, and turn that support back on yourself.
Yeah,
that's something that I hadn't really thought about until it came up in the session, the mindfulness session.
yes.
And I find it easier to support someone else than myself.
Yes.
But,
Yeah.
And you are not the only one from the sessions. You know, it is a common thing to report. You know, have a tough upper lip, get on with it, stop slacking, make more effort. You know, there are those kind of messages in society that we kind of, you know, we're brought up with, and we can tend to be very unkind to ourselves, even if we're kind and supportive to everybody else. So it's great to have that permission to start actually taking a step back again and thinking, you're just a human being. So, and if I was your best friend, how would I treat you? Then treating yourself as a best friend can also be quite liberating. Yeah, so there we go. So just a kind of overview of some of the things that get covered in the course, and it's a bit of a long answer to, well, what is mindfulness then? So we started off by talking a little bit about, well, what is mindfulness and what sort of things crop up in mindfulness. And we've talked about the meditation and things that cropped up from there. And then the recapping on the course has helped us to kind of, you know, think about some of the themes that crop up. So I'll draw the session to a close by just looking at the second handout in the course, which then asks, well, what is mindfulness? And there are lots of definitions to what is mindfulness. And as you can see, it's not really a totally easy answer to say that. But basically, one of the most popular definitions of mindfulness is the ability to be fully present, aware of where we are, what we're doing, and to not be overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. So that's a quote from Mindful Organization, and that's based on lots of research, lots of stuff that's been written by various famous people within the mindfulness community. So in the course, we start by sort of unpacking that then. So we've touched on it, haven't we, this morning? So being present instead of on autopilot. Our mind's gone somewhere else. It's got on a train ride and gone to somewhere else for the day, and our body's just sitting there, and we're ignoring it. Aware of where we are, what we're doing, not overly reactive or overwhelmed. That's, those are important words, aren't they? Anybody like to just say what their understanding of that is? So to not be overly reactive to what's going on around us or overwhelmed.
Just you can be mindful of what's happening and just stepping back and thinking about it before you decide how to respond rather than react to it.
Yeah.
Because it diffuses the situation.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. So we've talked about that in various ways, haven't we? Yeah.
It is stepping back, taking a breath or a number of breaths, and then just deciding on a response that's going to be measured and controlled, and as we've said, not overwhelmed at all.
Yes, like with your drilling and stuff going on outside. So that's a really good example, isn't it?
I was quite impressed with myself. So I want to say I was quite kind about myself this morning.
Yeah. So instead of overreacting, being overwhelmed, which is an understandable human response to somebody drilling outside, it's horrible. However, you've managed to remain calm, tranquil, and full of serotonin this morning, happy hormones, instead of being coursing with all of that stress response. So actually, it's been an awful lot better for you that you've done that. The second part to what is mindfulness then. So mindfulness is a quality that we already possess. So it's not something we have to conjure up or invent. It is there. But layers and layers of conditioning and our upbringing and society tends to bury mindfulness in ourselves. So mindfulness courses and practices can help you learn to access it, because it is there, and it can do all sorts of fabulous things if we let it. Even if it's just tiny bits in daily life, then it can make a real difference. So I shall stop recording. So if you're watching this on our channel, then thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that it's given you a kind of flavour, and maybe you'll want to have a look a bit more. Or maybe you just want to work with what you've got from this session. So thank you very much.